Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. A lot of news, a lot of buzz going down as Nick himself is trying to find a home, a new place to live. I know he's been grinding those realtors and those places around New York trying to find somewhere to live. So I had to bring him in here to discuss what I consider to be pretty much a bombshell that was dropped yesterday out of nowhere. Before yesterday, obviously the combine's getting going. The speculation about the Giants potentially being interested in a quarterback in this draft, Nick, there's speculation about them potentially trading up, but it was just speculation. There was nothing really to it. But as we all know, following this team for as long as we have, and for those who don't, we'll go over it as to why now. But there are two people who you listen to when they report on the Giants. It's Jay Glazer, who called the Odell Beckham Jr. trade before it happened, called the Wink Martindale situation before it happened. And it's Mike Garafolo, who's also had an incredible track record when it comes to Giants. Why does Garafolo have that track record? Well, he covered the beat before there was even such thing. He was the beat guy. And since then, he's moved up to NFL Network. And since then, he's collected and continued to have really good sources from inside the building. A lot of the new beats that come on, this is not a knock against them, but it's tough for them to gain sources within the organization.
Shots fired.
Yeah, no shot. It's tough for them to gain sources within the organization. It's really tough these days. And you have to really work at it and you have to build it. And Mike Garafolo has built a really big network. So it was a bombshell to me, Nick, when I heard him say on NFL Network yesterday, and I'll have it right up here. For those who didn't hear it, Mike Garafolo said he thinks there's a 76.9, and this is a funny number because I don't know where it comes from, and it's odd and it's weird, but he said he's a 76.9%, and that's high chance the Giants take a quarterback in round one. And everyone on, it was a reaction from Ian Rappaport and whoever else was on set, like, whoa, well, what? What did you just say? He's like, and Garafolo replied, he said, you said be specific. And because they said that seems pretty high. He's like, yeah, you said be specific. And he said, as I've mentioned throughout, I knew the Giants were at 6 when I said 6 was the potential trade back spot for the Bears, because he's been discussing, will the Bears or will the and for the Patriots as well, will they trade pick 1 or 3? And he's like, I mentioned 6 because I knew the Giants were at 6. And he says they're a team that is taking the temperature. And this was a quote from Garafolo, to see what the price will be to move up to 1, 2, and 3. The fact that he's reporting, Nick, that they are literally taking the temperature. They're trying to see what the price is to trade up. That's not like a speculation. That's him reporting that. Now, the 76.9% chance of them taking a quarterback in round 1, that's speculation on his part, probably based on his sources. But they literally, according to him, taking the temperature to see what it would be like to trade up for one of those spots. And they said, if they draft someone, he could be holding the seat for someone, or, Daniel Jones could still be holding his seat. But he followed up and he said, yeah, 76.9% chance he could see the Giants taking a quarterback in round 1. And then to follow up on that, today, I saw this, Nick. Art Stapleton, a current Giants beat reporter, said on the New York Revival podcast last night that he thinks there's a 65% chance the Giants are trading up for a quarterback in this draft class. So starting to be some smoke that I just didn't think was possible. To me, when Garafolo drops a bomb, it's like, wow, Garafolo is saying there's a almost 77%, just under 77% chance the Giants trading up for a quarterback or just drafting a quarterback in round 1. That's interesting to me.
It's very interesting, and I love the numbers that are thrown out here. How specific, Mike Garafolo, right? You really want to get specific, 76.9% and then a 65% chance. Look, the numbers are whatever. I don't really care about that, but there is a narrative now that the New York Giants are possibly going to trade future assets to get their quarterback. And when you really just look at the totality of everything, Dan, is that really shocking?
No.
Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are not going to plan on sucking this again. Like, look, the Giants have sucked for so long. We're used to picking in the top 8, top 5, whatever, right? That's not what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll want. Brian Daboll's smart enough to know that if they're picking this high again, he's probably going to be out of a freaking job. So they're going to be looking at it and say, hey, let's go out and get our quarterback, because there are, 4 quarterbacks that they may like that high. Could be more. Who knows? Maybe it's only 3. I don't know. But they probably are going to hone in on one individual. And if you can just give up a future one of your extra 2s that you have, and then maybe another 2 or something like that to move up and secure your guy, which might also buy you another year of being employed, which is another thing that we can discuss, whether that's something that we want our coaching staff and our general manager to do. That's probably a discussion for another day. But I don't see why it's a crazy thought to think that being at 6, you're in strikeable range to not give up that much to jump up to 1 or 2 to get your guy. It kind of makes sense, bro.
It does kind of make some sense, especially when you consider what what Brandon Beane said at the combine yesterday. And it was an interesting quote. I don't know if you saw that, Nick. They
Yeah,
asked
I saw
Brandon
it. Yeah.
Beane, and he's like, look, when we did it, we traded up all those assets to go get Josh Allen in our draft in 2018. I knew that I was going to take heat for that. And I knew that people were going to say, what if this doesn't work out? You're trading all those assets up for a quarterback and you could build a team with those assets. And he said, guess what? If it didn't work out, I knew I wasn't going to be around to answer those questions. And that's an interesting thought process from a GM, right? That all these GMs likely have, Nick. It's like, you guys can worry about if it's going to work. Are you giving up too many assets? Like, how are you going to build a team without those future draft picks? But he's not looking at it like that. He's looking at it like it's not going to work out for me, regardless if this quarterback doesn't work. But if this quarterback hits, we're not going to care about the future first we gave up. We're not going to care about a future second we gave up with the first. I don't care about the second round pick we gave up this year in addition to the future first on the second. And I think as we start to craft what a potential trade could be like for the Giants if they moved up to one with the Bears, it would include the second round pick from this year, potentially both their second round picks from this year, the first round pick from this year, next year's first, and next year's second is what I'm kind of honing in on. I don't think it's going to be 3 firsts, but it's possible. The Giants don't really have a player to throw in there.
Do they not have a player to throw in there? Like, I think if Ryan
Not
Poles,
really.
I think if Ryan Poles loves a player, that player can be
Yeah,
added.
if he does, to me, there's just no player that they could love, unless it would be like Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah, I think that's a name right there that really comes to mind. Kayvon Thibodeau is certainly a player that could be added into this trade if Ryan Poles is so inclined, and if the Giants are that desperate to jump the Washington Commanders, who are at 2, to get the quarterback. Say if that quarterback is Caleb Williams, and the Bears are going to trade out, they could easily just trade out with Washington, and now you have Caleb Williams in your division that you have to battle. I think the divisional aspect of this is a micro story, not the primary story of this possible trade. But Washington Commanders are a division rival. I mean, they're not the Eagles and the Cowboys, but they're in our division, and if the Bears want to trade just to 2, they can do another trade if they want to. But then the Washington Commanders get possibly the guy that the New York Giants really want and really covet. And that's another part of this that we really need to consider.
Yeah, it is a part of this. I mean, I don't really consider Mike Garafolo to be that kind of reporter, and I know there are. Even Joe Shane said it last year, said it yesterday at the combine. He was talking about a different topic, Nick, but he was discussing the articles that came out toward the end of the year about the Wink and Dable relationship, and he said frankly, he said this point blank. He's like, he thinks that there are some narratives that were out there from some of the reporters and the articles that were written about that were narrative based, and they were driven to push a certain narrative. And that could be the case when it comes to any of these rumors for the draft. We know that. Like, it could be a situation where Mike Garafolo is hearing from his sources that, are typically right, but maybe in this case they're starting to push an agenda. So they pressure Washington to want to trade up from 2 to 1 and give up those assets. But all that seems.
I'm not even suggesting that. I mean, that is a possibility, of course.
Right.
I'm suggesting the Giants need to really look at Washington and say, if Washington does trade up, they're going to get the guy that we really want, a guy that we're certain is going to, or maybe not certain, but we really believe is going to be very good. And now we have to deal with them in our division when we can go and get that guy, giving up assets. Yes, but now we have the guy in our building. We're fixing what I hope behind closed doors they can all acknowledge is the biggest problem with the New York Giants is the quarterback position and not having that consistent player who can elevate his game and elevate the team to a level where you're consistently competing for Super Bowls, which is something the Giants haven't had since they had Eli Manning.
Yeah, and that's definitely in consideration because I think, all the smoke I've heard, Nick, and I think it's starting to come out more and more is that the Giants love Caleb Williams, and that's the eye of their apple right there. Like, that's the one they want. And if that's the case, yeah, the apple of their eye, and that's the eye of the apple. That's the if that's the case, like, they're not going to care about giving up an extra future first to get Caleb versus like maybe if we trade to 3, we give up, we don't have to, we get that first next year because guess what? Those firsts aren't guarantees and they need to guarantee that they have the right feel and the right talent in their minds at the quarterback position over that extra talent they would get. So I wouldn't surprise me if they do, if they're looking to trade up, if it is going to be to 1 instead of 3, because the only place, in my opinion, you're going to get Caleb Williams in this draft is number 1 overall. I've said that from the start. I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it throughout the process. Bet what you want to bet. My bet will be that Caleb Williams will be the first overall pick in this draft. I don't know who it'll be to go to, but he will be the guy. And all I've heard is the Giants love him, by the way. And it's not surprising to me necessarily, but I will say this, Nick. Mike Garafolo doesn't really miss with this stuff. And that's the interesting part to me. Like, you look at his track record, he's not like getting fake sources in there. He's not reporting on things that don't end up coming true. So I think he has sources inside the building that say, and he had reported this point blank, that the Giants are taking the temperature. They're trying to see what it would take to trade up. And if they are doing that, it's for a quarterback. Like, we know they're not trading up for Marvin Harrison Jr. That's not how this thing works. They wouldn't do that. Brandon Beane didn't trade up to get the best receiver in that class. He traded up for Josh Allen when Joe Schoen was with him during that process. And if you look at some of the other comments from yesterday, some might focus on Joe Schoen saying, Daniel Jones is our guy. We fully believe in him. But what's he going to say on that front? He can't give away. Everyone that's smart and can see through that and understands that he couldn't say anything else about Daniel Jones. He has to say the boilerplate thing so he doesn't lose any leverage in trade discussions if he is trying to trade up for a quarterback. But the other things he said were really interesting. I'm going to bring this up now just because I thought it was really interesting. He said this actually in the interview with Chris Sims. And he said, the reality is, this is Joe Schoen's quote. The reality is Daniel Jones is coming off 3 injuries in 2 years. He says, we're going to address the quarterback position. That doesn't mean we're going to address QB1. That means he could be looking at QB2, QB3, depending on how it plays out. But he did mention the 3 injuries in 2 years. And to me, like, if you're hearing Garafolo saying there's a 77% chance the Giants trade up, you have Art Stapleton saying there's 65% chance they trade up. Like, they're in on QBs, Nick, and to me, it says more about where they feel about Jones. And that might not be based on his play. They might still believe that if they got the right team around him, he could win with them. But they might be thinking a totally different thing from an injury front than we know. We don't have access to the injuries. We have what Joe Schoen tells us, like, oh, he's progressing. He's doing this. What's he going to tell us? He's not going to tell us if they felt like, oh, we watched the tape when he came back from that after that second neck injury and we didn't like his throwing motion. We didn't like how the balls were releasing from his hands. We have real big concerns about how he can throw a football moving forward with this neck injury. They're not going to release any of that to the media. It doesn't make any sense to tell the public that. So I just find this prediction from Garafolo very shocking and a very, very much so like a bombshell thing for him to say. I was not expecting him to come out and say there's a 77% chance the Giants trade up for a quarterback and end up with a quarterback in round 1.
I wasn't expecting that to be vocalized, but I don't think it's a shock that the Giants are entertaining this at all. Like, it makes sense that the Giants would be entertaining this. They haven't had the quarterback. You can go out and you can get the quarterback right now. You're in striking distance. And I don't know if that's trading up to 1 or trading up to 3. The Giants could like 3 quarterbacks in this draft class. They do like Drake May, and they have some sort of inclination that the Washington Commanders aren't in on Drake May. And Caleb Williams does go 1. Washington can go with somebody else and say, if even this is on draft night, possibly the Giants make that trade and they have, okay, if Drake May's at 3, we're going to trade up with the Patriots. We have a deal in place, blah, 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 blah. That could be something that happens, right? And one other thing too, I want to mention, the Bills, they traded up from 12 to 7, if I'm not mistaken. And
right. 21 to 12 and then 12 to 7.
And all they gave up was 2 2s to do that. Now this is going to be a little bit, a little bit more costly, but there's also going to be a huge difference trading up to 1 to get Caleb Williams, where there's going to be a ton of leverage. If the Chicago Bears are not going, they're not going Caleb Williams, they're not going quarterback, so many teams are going to be calling for that number 1 overall pick. So you're going to have to outbid. You may have to outspend a lot of other teams. But if you're trading up to 3, it might not be as dire. It might not be as expensive to trade up. Now, there's going to be other teams, though, that might want Drake May, too. You have teams like the Vikings who are picking behind the New York Giants who could be willing to sell a farm for a player that they really like. So that's a lot of stuff we have to entertain. And I'm going to be going through the film of all of these quarterbacks. And, dude, evaluating quarterbacks, it takes a while. It's not something where you just like turn on you need to try and understand every concept that the offense is running. And even when you do that, it's difficult to actually know because you don't know the play call. You don't know what the quarterback is being told. So there's a lot of kind of conjecture. There's a lot of guessing as to just looking at the play, but even so, you can still evaluate like arm talent and things of that nature. But I'm excited for this entire draft process, Dan. I really am. I think we're gonna have some great content coming down the pipeline here shortly.
For sure. And it is interesting what you say. I'm going to get back into some other stuff, but about the quarterback evaluation process for that we'll go through, because like you see, like a lot of these offenses, like in the college level, these coaches are literally like piping in what they want them to do before the snap. And like, they're just simply like listening to their coach, even about like where to go with the football. And it's interesting because I remember watching Ole Miss Eli Manning. I bring this up just because it comes up on the network that I watch. He was making checks the line of scrimmage at Ole Miss, man. He had control of that line of scrimmage. If you see a quarterback doing that type of stuff at the college level, I know Joe Burrow did that a lot at LSU as well when they got into that no huddle. And that's still today. Like, I'm still looking for a quarterback who can do that, Nick. Like, have the pre-snap. Like, you can have such an edge at the NFL level as a quarterback if you can get your team into a spot before the snap where you're making checks with your wide receivers and you're adjusting on the fly before the snap instead of just kind of like going with the flow and going with the play call and, it's not there. They adjusted. They guessed right. They rotated post snap. Now what do? Oh, I run or I scramble. I break the pocket. And so I'll be looking for that as well to see if any quarterbacks have that kind of authority at the college level. I'm not so sure we'll see that. I feel like that's less and less a thing as we go through nowadays. Like I feel like coaches have more authority. But that's an interesting point you brought up, and I just want to discuss that for a second. But as far as this situation goes with Garafolo reporting this, I just want to make it clear. He said there's a 76.9% chance the Giants take a quarterback in round 1. And I think a lot of people speculated, does that just mean they're going to sit at 6 and take any quarterback that's still left for them? It'd be McCarthy or Penix or Nix or Bo Nix. But I don't necessarily think that's the case, because he followed up by saying they've been taking the temperature on what it's like to trade up 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, exactly.
And as you mentioned with Brandon Beane, he moved from the 20s to 12 to 7 to get his quarterback. I think if the Giants go quarterback and Garafolo gets his prediction right, because if you're saying 77%, you think that basically means there's a much better chance than not that they go quarterback in round 1. It's going to be via trade up. So I think that's the last thing I want to take away with this bombshell report from Garafolo. It's get ready and strap up and buckle in, because if you're one of the people who wants them to take a quarterback but just is hoping they fall to 6 or whatnot, get ready and get prepared that it's going to cost assets. They're going to have to trade up assets to get this player. And of course, that's why some of us didn't really want to win that Patriots game or that Washington game. I mean, that's the
people
option.
People are going to kill you in the comments for this.
They are, but it's the reality of the situation. If you don't have to trade up, you get to keep the assets and you get the quarterback that you trade up for.
Yeah.
And all you lose is those wins.
Of course.
Nothing now. But that's just kind of what some of us feel about those past ones. But I understand, the players have to play to win. The coaches have to coach to win. I still will always understand that. Just as a fan, I think it's fair to not want to hope to not value those wins in a lost season. That's just my thought.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. Oh, my friends, you know what time it is. You're hungry, you're starving, and you desperately need pizza. You should get the best pizza on the market, and that is, of course, Little Caesars. Make Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL part of your game day. Order online during the Pizza pregame all day on NFL game days and even on Pro Bowl Sunday, and get ready for some football fun and cheesy, delicious pizza. Choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave. Either way, you win. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the game. Yeah, I believe later in that interview, Dan, Garafolo, I think it was, said something about like how it has to be a historic haul. But I'm also like unsure if that's actually the case. Like it's different than, and they talked about the Pelissero, Rappaport, and Garafolo talked about this, how it does have a little bit of a different feel this year. But Ryan Poles has the NFL world by the cojones, right now, man. He has so many different things that he could do. And just look at last year. How much did he benefit from the fact that he had a first-round pick of a crappy team, and now he has Carolina's first overall? This isn't the Bears pick. This is Carolina's pick, because Carolina was pathetic. It worked out for them significantly making that trade. It all really is going to come down to, do they want the quarterback? Because they're in prime position to get the quarterback right now, or they could trade out. They could just trade to 2 if they don't love Caleb. But there's just so many options. What are you doing with Justin Fields? What are you going to get for Justin Fields? And also, did you see Justin Fields like celebrating all over Twitter today?
Yeah.
Did you see that video? Like, what is that about? Is he going to Atlanta? Is he staying with the Bears?
Yeah.
There's so many things that we don't necessarily know right now, but we do know that it's probably going to have to be a big haul. The Giants do want to trade up to 1, and there's going to be a lot of competition for that trade if the Bears don't want Caleb.
Yeah, but that is true. There's going to be a lot of competition, but I think it's interesting to consider what the Bears would actually consider as the true competition for what they want. So, for example, this is what I'm trying to get at. That video you saw with Justin Fields, who knows if it's true, but in the end, you kind of heard his agent say, like, you're going home. And Justin Fields' home is Atlanta. There's been speculation that the Falcons are interested. Say the Bears do trade Justin Fields, and they're going to trade the number 1 pick. Let's say both of those two things happen. If that's the case, in my mind, what they would be doing here, they're getting rid of their current quarterback. They're getting rid of the first overall pick where they could get a quarterback. In my mind, they're trying to accomplish what you just said. Pick up a historic haul, collect draft picks and draft capital. But I also don't think that in that scenario, Nick, that they would want to just go scratch at the quarterback position. So I feel like the Giants, while there is a lot of competition for the number 1 pick, you mentioned some of the teams that might want to trade out. The Broncos, the Vikings were a great example that you brought up, and it makes some sense. While there's some competition, like, there also is the aspect that I'm thinking about, Nick, which is, would the Bears, after getting rid of Fields and that first overall pick, want to get themselves within a range where they could still get a quarterback that they believe in? Let's say, for example, that quarterback is Bo Nix, or let's say an even better example, a quarterback who has a lot more upside in my mind and the mind of maybe them and the officials, a JJ McCarthy. If, let's say, your plan, Nick, is to acquire all these assets, but still get your shot at a developmental quarterback who's young and has arm talent and a lot of the traits that NFL GMs look for, like a McCarthy, well, do you want to trade all the way down into the teens, or do you want to trade all the way down to 11 even and take that risk? Maybe not. But if you trade down to 6, all you really have to worry about is the 5th overall pick. And if the Chargers are going to let a team jump you to get from, and even then, you could, even if you really want this guy, lock it in after by trading a little bit, maybe a 3rd round pick to move up from 6 to 5 with the Chargers. But at that stage, you're still locking in, if you like McCarthy to that extent, that's the guy you want to build around that. But if you trade all the way back to 11 or 12 or 13 or whoever it may be, the Vikings, wherever they're drafting, you don't have as good a chance, in my opinion, of getting that quarterback while also getting the assets that you want. So that's why I feel like the Giants may have a little bit of an edge potentially in a trade with the Bears if they were going to go from 1.
I think it could be that. It also could just be a trade to 2, and they could reevaluate from there. Just allow Washington to get their guy, pocket, I don't know what exactly it would cost, 2nd round picks, valuable assets that they would get from Washington, and then they could trade again. But you're right. It still stands. They could trade with Washington and then trade with the New York Giants. The Giants jump up to 2, and they can select Drake May or Jane Daniels or whoever they like, right? So there's so many different outcomes that can happen. I like the JJ McCarthy call too. Because I look at like Shane Waldron, like and they're not going to draft just based on what Shane Waldron wants.
True.
They're drafting the face of their franchise if they're opting to not go Caleb Williams at 1, and if they're opting to trade Justin Fields to get more assets to build around, let's say, a JJ McCarthy or a Bo Nix or whoever the hell it is, right? Who fits Shane Waldron, who was the former Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator? Like, who fits that offense very well? I think a player like JJ McCarthy would fit what Shane Waldron has done over the past couple of years with Seattle.
Yeah, and they had their eye on Harbaugh, because they were considering a head coaching change at some point in the season. They had the Midwest teams, in my opinion, seem to like to draft the Midwest. I just see this happening all the time. It's speculation on my part that as far as that goes. But if they were, let's say, in on McCarthy, that's the move for them. It's the trade to 6 with the Giants, because you're still going to get him there. You may not get him in other spots. So it's very interesting to see what happens and where the Giants are at with it. But Mike Garafolo, man, just that's where it starts for me. Him saying there's a 76.9% chance the Giants end up with a quarterback in the 1st round. And that's Mike Garafolo. That's not, it's something serious when Garafolo or Glazer talk about the Giants. They don't do it often. Garafolo never does this. So
Another side tangent. I know they talked about trading up, but say if they aren't comfortable with trading up the New York Giants, they could be the team that is comfortable in a JJ McCarthy or one of those quarterbacks that aren't in the top 3. And that could be the quarterback that Garafolo was referencing as well. Like, that's another aspect of this that could be true.
It's all interesting, Nick, but I am in a different mindset now when we hear that something from Mike Garafolo on this, and I wasn't even expecting trade up to be really within the range. I didn't think the Giants felt like that. But look, like you said, Brandon Beane did it, and if Joe Shane wants his guy, he's not going to worry about the future assets. He's going to worry about getting his guy. And so buckle up. We could be hearing some interesting reports, rumors, and maybe even at some point news on the Giants trades and the NFL draft and the next quarterback potentially of this franchise. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.